Michael, in trying to defend religion or theology against the advances of science, some very sophisticated people and friends would seek to focus on not the results of science, but rather the underlying philosophy of naturalism that is the weak linchpin, that if they could get rid of the naturalism, then they would have they would be less vulnerable to the factual attacks of science. So I want you to focus, as a philosopher, on the underlying philosophy of science, which is naturalism. We might want to distinguish, and then discern why people who defend a religious point of view will go after that.
Well, first of all, as a philosopher, I'm going to say, depends what you mean by naturalism. And I think that there's a useful distinction to be drawn between methodological naturalism, what the working scientist does, and metaphysical naturalism, one of your favorite words, I gather, the ontology of it all. In other words, does God exist? And
the underlying nature of the reality.
I think you could put that one, I would want to say, on one side for the moment. And let's talk about methodological naturalism, which I see as the commitment to the world being run according to unbroken regularity, namely laws. And let me say unambiguously, I'm a naturalist all the way down.
And proud of it.
It's turtles all the way down when it comes to naturalism. So using now the word naturalism in that context. Now,
methodological naturalism.
Talking now about methodological naturalism. Now, it is true that in the last 25, 30 years, this has been a matter of some considerable debate, and in particular, a lot of religious people, Christians, not all by any means, but certainly have been using naturalism as a tool to belabor science, and most particularly evolutionary science. I mean, this has certainly been the case with the creationists, the out-and-out creationists like Duane Gish. More recently, it was with the intelligent design theorists. Philip Johnson, the former law professor at Berkeley, made this the center of his case. Johnson said, I don't care about the fossils. I want to focus on naturalism, meaning methodological naturalism. And it's also very much some very, very respectable philosophers. Alvin Plantinga, for instance, who used to teach at Notre Dame, is ardent that naturalism is a flawed, failed philosophy.
And let's discuss that, because I know Al, and I think his position is worth exploring in detail to get your response to it. So his position is, he believes in evolution. He said, but if evolution is the mechanism that produced the way of thinking of naturalism, it's self-contradicting, because the philosophy, the process that would develop that kind of naturalism would then would then be very specific and not be able to discern other kinds of things, and is self-refuting.
Well, I'm not sure that I mean, this is not a new argument from Plantinga. In fact, an English Prime Minister, Arthur Balfour, of all people, launched this criticism against Darwinism in the 19th century. Wow. What would I say in response to this? Yes, at some level, I think that evolutionary theory does show that it's all, if you like, relative, in the sense that it has to be a question of making things hang together, what we philosophers call a coherence theory of truth rather than correspondence. But I would question Al, on the other hand. I would say, well, how are you so certain that you have the truth, that your good God is guaranteeing the truth, given Descartes said, good Christian, maybe there's an evil demon who makes us think all of these things. And I don't think metaphysically that Descartes' evil demon has ever been put back in the bottle. So my feeling is that Al is just as liable to those ultimate metaphysical kinds of questions. But
I think if you once you do that, I think you're on his territory, because you're saying which is the best. How do you infer to the best explanation? And that you're willing to play the game, which I'm not critical of that. I'm just asking that. You're now saying through which ultimate worldview is the best way to explain this process.
I don't take it personally to be told that I'm on Al Plantinga's territory. I mean, he's the best philosopher of religion in North America. So if I'm on his territory, good for me. So the question is, now, I'm on his territory, but does it mean to say that when the king says jump, I should say where? Oh, absolutely not. I'm going to say no. I think there are certain, we can argue this one, and of course we're on the same territory, but we're, if you like, fighting it out on that territory.
Okay, and this is a very good fight. And so what do you do with the argument that says that the process through evolution that developed our way of thinking, developed it to escape cougars and jaguars on the African plain? If you believe that, if you believe in purely naturalistic view, then that's the mind that we have. So how can that mind be able to subsume all these other questions?
Well, at one level, I want to say, why should that worry me? But the other level I would want to say is, why, if you have this scenario, develop this, does this in any sense negate the idea of some kind of God, the God of Christianity, at some level, working on this, and this is the way that he wants his creation to unfold? As a former Quaker, it seems to me that this is a piece of candy for the Christian, in the sense that you notice the metaphor I'm using is Quakers, because Quakers in England make all the chocolates, Cadbury's, Roundtree.
So I learn something every day.
Yeah. So it's a piece of candy for the Christian, in the sense that here it all is. This is how it unfolds. But surely, as John Henry Newman said, I believe in evolution because I believe in God, and what I'm seeing is it unfurls. So why should I be worried by this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think the criticism is of evolution itself.
Yeah.
It's of the assumption that God is not involved in evolution. Yeah. If you assume that God is involved in evolution in some way, designing the general laws or intervening however you want, then I think it runs. But then you have to have God.
Yeah. Yes, and of course there's the question, you're getting away from miracles, but I don't have to tell you that a lot of Christians, in their own right, thanks to higher criticism, want to get away from miracles. Mm-hmm. Was the marriage at Cana really turning water into wine? Or was it Jesus' sense of love and everything that this rather mean host, who'd been keeping it in the back room, suddenly said, I feel a real rotter. Get the best wine out. Now, that seems to me a real miracle. You don't need chemistry involved in this.
So, on the overview, how important do you think naturalism is to the dialogue between science and theology? How important is this philosophy in confronting it one way or the other in understanding how science and religion have to work together?
I think it's important. I don't think it's all important. If you look, as I said earlier on, this naturalism debate is about 25 years old, and I think there's a good reason for that. By the early 1980s, it was clear that creationism, fundamentalism, literalism was not going to make it as science. I mean, the court case in Arkansas that I was involved in, that Francisco Ayala and Steve Gould were involved, that came to an end. And so people like Philip Johnson now started to raise a different kind of argument, a philosophical argument. And so naturalism came in for 20 years as very important. My own feeling is, not that naturalism has been vindicated, but we're now seeing, you can be a naturalist and be religious and it's not an issue. What's happened now is that the literalists and others have moved on now, and now they're on the moral kick. Darwinism leads to Hitler. And, that it's so interesting to see the evolution of this counter debate. I don't think Darwin did lead to Hitler, but that's another segment. But as I say, so naturalism is important, but as a good social constructivist, I want to put it in historical context. And I think once you start to do that, you see that it's not necessarily all important.